Hello friends, we are going to make this book today, a sewn book, sort of like, well, not sort of, just like traditional books that we are used to in the United States. And we're going to do this in two parts. We're going to be doing the inside of this first. We're going to glue it, and then we are going to create the cover and put it all together. So let us begin the first part. So you should in your kit have this handout on sewn books. And what you're seeing illustrated here are the different signatures or sections of paper that we are going to sew together. So all the little holes that we see here, these are called stations. I'll refer to that here, now, then, and again. And these, of course, are our signatures. So 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to be doing more than 4 signatures because our book is a little bit thicker than that. I think we probably have at least 6 signatures here. All right, what did you have in your kit there? In your little plastic baggie, you should have 2 pieces of Davy board. Check. You should have 2 pieces of decorative paper. You should have this sort of stiff paper that we're going to use as our end papers. And you should have a piece of book cloth that's long and a piece of book cloth that is short. You should also have a spine. And I'm looking for my spine. Well, by the time we do our second part, I will have found it. But this is the spine, this little strip of Davy board that makes this a hardback book. All right, let us begin, and we're going to begin with the sewing stuff. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to assemble your pages in groups of 4 or 5 or 6, whatever you like, into signatures. So essentially what you're going to do is you are going to fold over groups of paper in bundles of, say, 4 or 5, 6, something like that, like so. As you fold this over, you can flatten it out with your bone folder. Now, some people like to fold all their pages one at a time. For this thin paper that we're using, I don't really think that's necessary. I think you can do it all in one bunch. Do that to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 signatures in total, all right? And then we are going to create our jig. So I just had my jig around here. Here it is. Here's my jig, and this is what your jig is going to look like too. So you want to mark the head and the foot, and we are going to create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stations or sewing stations for ourselves. So I measured 7/8 here. So where's my ruler? Here it is. So as you look at your ruler, basically an inch is divided into 8 parts. So this first section is 7 of those 8 parts. And then this is 3/4, 3/4, 3/4, 3/4, 7/8 at the top. All right. You might want to stop for a few minutes and do that. Maybe pause and then fold over your paper, right? Make this and then come back to me, because I, like a cooking show, I've already done this. I did it in advance. So I'm going to remind you something about creating the holes or the stations for your sewing. You at home may or may not have one of these. I don't know if you built one of these for yourself. If you did, kudos to you. If not, no problem. We are simply going to open up our folded over paper, and we're going to line this up, and we are always going to be sure that we're putting the head and the foot in the same direction. This helps us when we start sewing through our book. We want to make sure that all of our signatures, or excuse me, our stations align with one another. So I'm going to open this up a little bit. This is pushed into that crease, and I'm simply going to go straight through with my awl, and I'm going to poke a hole into all these spots that are marked on my jig. Poke, poke. Okay, so 7/8, 7/8, all the rest are 3/4. Incidentally, if you find that you don't have paper, you're missing something, you can always make it up with other materials, okay? So there's no problem with cutting a piece of office paper in half, because that's exactly what I did with this, and using that if you wanted to make a longer book, or rather a thicker book or something like that, okay? So I have all of this ready to go. I want to line them up, make sure that all of my little stations line up. One of the things I sometimes do is I'll put a little pencil mark. Let me make sure you can see a pencil mark at the corner here so that I can remember, there's a little pencil mark, what my head is and what my tail is. All right, so we're gonna put this aside and we are going to thread our needle. Now, when you're sewing, you need to make sure that you have enough thread, right? And so one way to figure that out is to measure. So one signature is going to be this length of thread, or the height of the book. If I wanted to make a book of 6 signatures, it stands to reason I'm going to need 6 times the height of the book. I always give it 6 times the height of the book if there's 6 signatures plus 1.5 or 2 more, just to be sure. If you have more thread, it's easier to sew, and you don't have to panic at the end thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have enough thread, I'm gonna have to do a tie-on, which is yucky, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then let's give it another, and then like a half. All right, so I'm gonna cut that. Whoop. And you can see I was generous. It's better to be generous with your materials, even though there is some waste involved, than run out. All right, so this is pretty long. The kind of thread you have in your kit, it is waxed, which is really nice because waxed thread is a lot less likely than, say, like this thread, which is also beautiful thread, this linen thread, but it has no wax. And you can see this is sort of like limp, right? I don't know if you can see it from here, but this gets all tangly and sometimes can be really difficult to sew with. Okay, I've got this ready. I'm gonna refresh your memory on our cool move with sewing. Look at all these needles. Ooh, I have all the needles that I could possibly want. Okay, I'm looking for a needle that's gonna be thick enough in terms of the eye for me to get my thread through, and then skinny enough for me to sew with. Those are probably the same in terms of thickness, so I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna go with the slightly longer one. Boop. And incidentally, if you're off buying your own needles, do it by eye. I mean, you can look up upholstery needles and do those, but you know, just go to the sewing section of Michael's or Joann Fabrics or something like that and look at the needles. Do they look like something that, you know, seems about right for you? If it looks right, it's probably right. Okay, so I'm gonna thread this needle, biting on the end of it so that I can get it through that a little bit better. Okay, I got it through, and now I'm going to stab that thread. Let me do this so that you can actually see it. Let's put it on a piece of paper, although I don't want to hurt my paper because it's the paper I have for my end papers. Okay, I am stabbing through just a little length of this. Maybe this is 3 inches, something like that. So I'm stabbing through the thread or sewing through the thread, piercing the thread. It's probably a nicer way of saying it. Pulling that down over the eye of the needle, right? So I've got this loop, and then I'm gonna pull gently on the length of the thread until it stops. This allows me to have a piece of thread that's not gonna come off the needle, but doesn't have a knot either, all right? So that's really good for me in terms of having stations that aren't too big. You can imagine how big they'd have to be if there was some kind of knot involved. All right, we are gonna start sewing on the outside of the book. So this part not that part, this part, not that part. Okay, doesn't matter which end you start on as long as you are consistent. So I'm gonna start here, and my sewing is gonna be really simple. I'm gonna make sure that I'm stabbing through the pages and not creating a new hole. I'm gonna pull this through, and I'm gonna leave a little tail here of 3 inches or something like that, something that's easy for me to tie. If I find this to be difficult, if it slips around, I could take a bull clip it on, or a clothespin or something like that. I don't really have a problem with it slipping out that much. So I'm basically gonna sew in and out a running stitch, back and forth, just like you're sewing any old thing. Whoop, that's a long piece of thread. So this part is easy peasy. So see what I'm doing so far? Easy. So I should have 3 stitches on the inside and 2 on the outside. And I'm gonna come here, and now I need to pay attention. I wanna make sure my thread is tight, right? But I'm not gonna pull on this really hard or I'll rip my pages and be really sad. So I just want this to be tight, but not too tight, all right? So here I am. I'm gonna now start, let's see, I put little dots on here, so there's my little dots. I'm gonna start on my second signature. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this thread, right? And I'm gonna go straight into the next signature on the adjacent station or hole that you see. Let me show that to you. So I'm gonna go bloop over here and sew into that hole. So I'm jumping over to the next signature. All right, so far so good. Pull that through. Now they're connected. I'm gonna sew just like I did before, but not exactly like I did before. So 1 stitch, so far so good. And now my friends, we are going to sew this over here. So under the adjacent signatures stitch, okay? That's gonna help this be connected to this signature here. All right, under there, all right? And then once it's under there, you're gonna come back to your sewing on that second signature. Another link stitch or running stitch. Sometimes I use both terms. Pull that out. Do you see how this is like a little X there? That's what I'm gonna be doing whenever I can. So I'm gonna go bloop, under there, and then back over. Hear that ticking noise? That's my radiators. My radiators starting up in my studio. A carpenter that's down the hall was making some god-awful noise just a minute ago, and I thought, uh-oh. But so far, he's stopped. Okay, so here we are. All right, this might be a little loose. We are going to attempt to tighten it gently. Typically, the idea is you want to tighten it in the direction of your sewing, but we're gonna be doing this every single signature attachment. So now we've got this little bit of thread here, right? That was there in the beginning. We're gonna pinch this together and we are gonna tie a knot to keep those 2 things together. Boop, there's my knot. Hello, knot. And now I'm going to make another knot. Yoink. All right, so it doesn't slip away from me. All right, I can trim the end of that if I like, and I like. Boop. And now I'm ready to add my third signature. Again, making sure that these are aligning properly, doing the same move that I just did. So I'm just popping over here to this next signature, jumping on into that station or hole, wink. Here I am. And again, I'm repeating the whole process here. So this, all right, now I'm on the outside and I'm gonna sew under the last section. So in other words, do not sew, if you can help it, under the entire section of thread. Sew under the last signature's thread, all right? If you do not do that and you pull it all together really tight, you run the risk of ripping your stations or your holes because the thread is gonna be pulled too tight, okay? So I just sewed under that last one and I'm going right back to my next hole, also known as a station. And this waxed thread is very helpful. If you have thread that is not waxed, you can wax it. Of course, they sell beeswax just for this purpose, but you could just take some old candle that's around the house and run the thread along that, and that's enough to wax it. So here we go. I'm going under here, boink, just the one section. If you make a mistake early on, it's not that big of a deal because the tension isn't so bad. But if you do it, you know, down the road, you could be ripping some pages. Out again. All right, now I'm going to sew under that little itty bitty loop that you see right here. Wee little loop. I'm gonna sew under it and I'm gonna tie a knot. It's called a kettle stitch. I'm not quite sure why, I should look that up. But here we are. This is gonna be slightly loose, but not, you don't want like big loops of thread, okay? Big loops of thread are bad, like hanging off, like bloop, limp, not good, not for you. Okay, so I just sewed under that, and then I'm going to sew under it again, but this time I'm gonna make a knot. So I've sewed under that again. There's this little loop here. I'm gonna stick my needle in there so that I can make a knot. Yoink, there's a knot, all right? This should stay put. If you feel insecure about it, you can always do another knot. Pardon me, but not really necessary. It's not gonna slip, I don't think. All right, adding another signature. So I'm doing the same old move, and I'm going to open this up. And is that lined up right? Yes, okay. I put little pencil marks at the top of my head here. I'm trying to be careful not to make a new hole. I hate doing that. It happens, and it's ugly and it's messy. It makes me despair. All right. Pull that through. So far, so good. Sewing out. I'm gonna sew under the next section here to make my little X. Here's a pop quiz. Do I go under all of them? No, I do not. I go under the last one. And sometimes that's hard to figure out, right? But not that hard. All right, so we're gonna sew back over here, back in there. So this isn't hard. It's just like anything that requires some craft, you just have to be alert to making mistakes. Being consistent is probably the most important thing. And when you make a mistake, undo the mistake. Don't pretend like it's not happening, because it is, all right? If you missed one of these, it's not the end of the world. Keep on going. If you happen to not sew under one of these, just don't do it the next time. Okay, here I am. I'm gonna go under the last one, not the whole bundle. All right, bloop. And now I'm gonna do it again, but this time creating a knot. All right, so moving on, I can add my next signature. There's something comforting about a radiator, but it also can be really annoying at night. Our radiators at home, they bang and hiss. And sometimes it's charming, and sometimes it wakes you up and you just don't like it so much. Okay, there's that. We are in the home stretch, my friends. Yay! Okay, keep on sewing. Okay, I'm gonna sew under that last section. I can do it at any point, doesn't matter where. And again, as I'm sewing, this isn't some big blob, right? There's not a loose loop here. No loose loops. Okay, at this end, I'm sewing under that little bit there. Yoink. And going through to create a knot. This is fairly tight, but you'll notice, you know, it's not like super crazy tight, right? There is a way that we are going to tighten this up so it isn't so loose when we're turning our pages. Okay. Doesn't look like I marked that one, so I'm gonna just have to look at it. Theoretically, everything should be exactly the same, but we know that theory isn't life. All right, going through this one. I've been addicted to looking at things like old prints and books on eBay. And there are like 3 books right now that are killing me that I want so much. There's one from 1757 of this illustrator who illustrated, you know, a bunch of animals that he probably had never seen before, and they're insane at the illustrations. But the book that's available is all snakes, and I just, you know, snakes, I don't know. That's what's keeping me from pulling the trigger. And then what else? Oh, I bought a set of naturalist books. I love these old books of animal illustrations and plant illustrations. The plant ones are just elegant and beautiful, but the animal ones are just bizarre. And what they have to say about them is really odd, and I love it. I also love it, actually, the real reason I love it is because of the prints. They are either wood engravings, wood cuts, or steel cut engravings. And this period of time between, say, 1750 and 1900, I just love that kind of commercial printmaking, those illustrations. I don't know what it is about it, but I just love it. So anyway, I'm battling the urge to buy things. Okay, under here, I did buy some beautiful prints from 1797. They're plants, and they're hand. I forgot to do the knot. I'll do that again. They're hand watercolored, which just blows my mind. Okay, I am done with all 6 signatures. Hooray! Okay, so I'm gonna make sure that, you know, I have a knot, right? It's this kind of loose assemblage of these sections. I'm gonna cut this, all right? And what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to compress this, and then I'm gonna glue just the edge with PVA or polyvinyl adhesive, the stuff that we've been using, all right? Now, I do wanna say a couple of things about this. Some people sew tapes through here so that when they go to attach it inside of the book, the tapes go down in here. You will find if you look at old books, or most books, that they are not constructed that way. The way our book, or our book block, is going to go in here is going to be really simple and sort of scary. We're going to be gluing it in via the end pages. And you're going to say, what? Why would I do that? That seems really not so great. But guess what? It's how, if you look at old hardback books, or even, you know, current hardback books, 9 out of 10 times, that's how the book block is attached, right? It's just by these end pages. So that's also something we're going to be doing. So the first move is to just squeeze this tight. And in a perfect world, we'd have a book press, but we don't live in a perfect world. We live in our world. So I'm just gonna clip this here, and it's not a bad idea to clip it like this as long as you don't clip it where you need to glue later. I'll explain that. I'll explain what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's glue it. Let's do that because that's our last move for this section. Hello, glue. Let's see, I need some surface. I'm not destroying my cutting board here, but for you, not destroying your dining room table or your kitchen table or whatever. Okay, little bit of glue, not a lot. I don't need a lot. And I'm just gonna touch. And what I'm doing here is I'm just gonna glue these threads in place. And that's just gonna give a little extra strength to my my binding here. So I'm not slathering a ton of glue on here, right? Nothing's dripping. I just have, you know, a small bit. Okay, now I'm gonna tap this together. I want everything to be as even as I possibly can make it. I'm gonna squeeze it, and then I'm gonna put my bowl clips here, and I'm not gonna put them so close. I don't know if you can see that. You see how it's sticking out? So I don't want them to get stuck with my PVA. PVA is a pretty strong glue, you will find. So I know at least one bowl clip was in your kit. If you don't have two, well, I don't know where it went, but it's neither here nor there. You can use just about anything. You could use weights. You could stick this out. See how it's hanging off the tabletop here? You could just put a weight on top of that with this sticking out, and you could just put the glue along there, and that would be perfectly fine. The point is we just want to hold this together in a smart way so that this can set up, and that's going to take a couple of hours at least. Better even still to let it sit overnight and then come back to it. So we are going to stop for now. We've done the guts of the book, which is really terrific. And in the section 2 of this, we're going to create the cover, we're going to create the end pages, and we're going to put it all together. Okay? So I will see you in section 2.